Yay. So I haven't seen you in many months, and you have been through such an incredible journey that I just wanted to kidnap him and do a video about your brand new glorious book. You guys, take it in. It's so beautiful. The Natural History of Life and Death, and who better to write it than you? For the people that don't know this incredible being, he is an astrologer, he is an artist, he is an author, he is a playwright, he is a screenwriter, he is a filmmaker. I would say you're a Renaissance man in so many different ways.
Wonderful.
So tell us about this this incredible book. I'll sit up here on your playing field.
Yay. Hi, David. So I started this project, my goodness, more than 25 years ago. I discovered an archaeological site in Big Sur, California, that it turned out that the Forest Service didn't know anything about.
Ooh.
And I felt at the time that it was connected with the ancestors of the Hopi. And then 10 years ago, I made a documentary about that site and the two other sites that I feel are connected to it within 5 miles of it. So it's all one complex. And I made the documentary, and then in 2010, and made it free on YouTube. You can watch it for free.
What's the name of it?
It's called Emergence Beyond 2012, ?
Emergence Beyond 2012, ?
Right.
I can put a link to that underneath this video if you're watching this on YouTube.
Or you can go to my YouTube channel, David Alexander English. So then in 2012, I showed that, I screened that movie at Mystic Journey.
Mystic Journey.
And people were, the first time it was screened was at John Riley's place in Santa Monica.
Good friend.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Shout out to John Riley.
That was the premiere. But so I did this screening at Mystic Journey, and people were, after they watched, they were like, "Oh man, I got to see that again. There's so much information and everything," and that inspired me to. I was like, well, if I write a book, if I put all that information in a book, then it would be more accessible to people. So I started that project, and in the process, all this new information started to just pour in, And the next week after I decided I was going to make that book, I saw the movie Astral City, and that blew my whole
When you told me about that movie, I have recommended it to so many people that I read for at the Mystic Journey, specifically dealing with death in the afterlife.
Right, astral projection. That movie is based on a book written by this a Brazilian medium,
Chico Xavier.
Right.
Chico, amazing. He's like an Edgar Cayce of Brazil.
Right. He was the most respected medium psychic in Brazil, and the book was published in 1943. And the movie came out in 2010. And the CGI and everything. The music is done by what's his name, Philip Glass, and the CGI is top notch. But it's in. I'm
going to put a link underneath of that. If you haven't seen that, it is a must see.
Yeah, definitely. So I watched that movie, and it literally blew my mind, and I needed to know more. And I ended up reading the book version of it.
No Solaris?
Yeah. Uh-huh. And that was just the beginning of all this new information. So I got so overwhelmed, I was like, okay, what I've got to do is do just a straight transcript of the documentary. Just exactly, so when you look at the book, it's like all the pictures that are in the movie are exactly in the same order, and with the text, just recounting everything in sequence. And then that'll be one book, and then all the new information and all the, because people be like, they watch the movie and they want to know afterwards, like, David, what do you think? Where are we going? What's going to happen next?
What's happening on the planet?
Yeah.
What's happening on the planet?
Where are we going?
Astrologically, what's happening?
And so I wanted to do justice to that inquiry. So I began the project.
Before you jump into that, though, for those people who are tuning in right now, just like in a paragraph, like, who are you and why are you writing this book? Just so people that know. Do you know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
Just a little background about who you are.
Okay. My name is David Alexander English. And my father was born in a log cabin. And I'm not kidding. True story. He was born in a log cabin in North Carolina. In the swamp. And I would guess, I've written and published, this is my 29th book. 7 movies, 7 albums, 8 albums, something like that. I don't know.
I know. So composer,
yeah,
filmmaker,
yeah.
Author, sacred geometry painter.
Yeah, crazy. Isn't it wonderful?
It is. So, but I mean, like being such a genius on all these different planes, like.
These are our agreements, right? We're just fulfilling our agreements.
Okay.
And so I will tell you that the second time I accessed the Akashic Record through a creative visualization, I was shown the first time I was invited to come into the universe, and I was told that I'd incarnated 1,878 times, and I was shown what my first incarnation was, and this happened in 1997. So that's a mouthful right there. And since then, I've been kind of processing that information. Ask and ye shall receive. But I will tell you, I'll take a step back and I'll tell you what the first thing I was told or shown when I accessed the Akashic Record for the first time. The first thing I was told and shown was that the universe said, you get in there and you're like, okay, so what do I want to know? What do I want to ask? And I had a moment of cleverness, as you do as a human being, right? And I was like, what does the universe want me to know most, right? And without skipping a beat, the universe said, you are loved.
Aww.
And I was like, yeah. But that sounds like I'm making it up. What? Give me something with some more bells and whistles. And the universe said, you are loved. And no matter what I asked in that session, it would just say, you are loved. And I was like, okay, all right, okay. So when I came out of the meditation, you write down your experience and everything. And it started to hit me, the profundity of that. And every time I tell the story, it actually, I get a recharge about that you are loved. We are loved.
We are loved.
And there is nothing more, there's no more greater spiritual technology than unpacking that
we are loved.
We are loved.
Well, every one of your paintings, actually, even the colors that you choose, projects we are loved. Like there's beautiful like pastels, and they're floating, and there's a conscious being that's observing the reality in harmony with the colors and the scheme and the ocean and the space and the sky and the stars.
Well, there you go.
That's how he paints. Okay, let me just tell you guys a little something about David Alexander English. So I was afraid to go to Venice a lot in my life, because it was just kind of when I got here in the early 90s, it was kind of a dangerous place to go. So I never went. However, one of my girlfriends, who was a secretary of mine at the time, said, you got to go to Venice. So I went to Venice, and I saw this incredible picture that my soul was like, oh my God, that reminds me of a dream that I had. So I look up and I'm trying to find who painted this. And it was him. And so I said, where did you see this? And he said something so simple like, oh, it's a manhole cover. And I was like, it's the secrets of the universe. It was in my dream. Like I saw all this stuff about where I'm going in the next 100 years on Earth. They were like these circles. And you painted this like it was a portal of sacred geometry.
The 12 harmonic.
And the paint that he chose was the exact color of the blueprints that I got handed in my dream.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And it was with these gold strings that were overlaying this portal. And it was so like profound. I said, I don't have any money right now, but if I go to the bank, can you meet me at my house and I will pay for this painting? And it was like, I was an original. Yeah. So you did. And you came to my house that night. I don't even know this guy. And he started talking to me. And like 7 hours later, I mean, every single question I've ever had in the universe came up. And we became friends. And that was almost 15 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't remember what year that was. Like 2004 or something maybe?
Yeah. But anyway, so the paintings speak to the consciousness. And these words are, I mean, I guess trying to describe like what you're channeling.
Well, where we're going with this is since I have some really important information to deliver, and so does everybody, right? And all we can do is our best, right? So just as an example, right now there's approaching 7.8 billion souls incarnate on Earth. And the day I was born, August 26, 1957, there were approximately 2.8 billion souls on the planet. And there's been 5 billion souls in the past 62 years. 5 billion more incarnate souls in the past 62 years. And in context, up until around 1900, there were only, it wasn't until around 1900 that we reached the number of 1 billion souls. So in a century, we have 7 times that number, right? So when I look at, this is something I've been looking at and aware of for over 20 years. I've been watching this population.
Souls grow.
Exactly, the number of incarnate souls. Because I was really curious about what would happen when the number of incarnate souls was in the same harmonic as the base frequency of the Earth, the Schumann resonance that's caused by 3,000 to 4,000 lightning strikes that hit the Earth every day. And that number, it's 7.83. So 7.83 hertz, 7.83 vibrations per second. And the optimum meditative state is there's basically 4 main brain wave patterns, and they're all happening at the same time in everybody's body, right? We say that there's delta, theta, alpha, and beta, right? And delta is between 0 and 5, 5, and theta is between 6 and 8, and alpha is between 9, 10, 11, 12-ish, right? And beta is above that. The optimum meditative state is between 6 and 8 cycles per second, right? So basically 7 cycles per second. And what's interesting to me is that the number 7 is the only number between 1 and 10 that doesn't divide evenly into 360, right? Instead, it creates what's known as a transcendental number, a number that repeats to infinity, right? So that's why everybody has this thing about the number 7, and me especially. And so right now, and for probably the past 3 years, the number of incarnate souls has been around 7 billion. But now we're approaching this point. Oh yeah, there's, the sound that you hear when there is no sound, the
white noise?
Yeah, that's one name for it. Another is Om.
Om.
Right? It's what I call it the divine vibration. Because it's the vibration by which all things are manifest, right? And it's infinite consciousness. And it's within every one of us. It's our consciousness. right?
I remember when you told me to meditate in my bathtub underwater,
Because you can hear it
and
more
hold your
easily.
breath, and until I heard the Om. And I remember the first time I heard it. And inside of the Om, I heard like choirs of angels, like on harmonics, that were like coming through the Om sound.
Yeah.
And remember that sunken tub I had in my bathroom?
Yeah.
You brought me that one too. I heard the first Om sound.
Yeah. So the divine vibration resonates, it has a wavelength of 7.23 centimeters. So it's in the 7th harmonic as well. So the population of the world has been in that harmonic with the, the base frequency of the earth and the ambient sound of the universe and it all comes down to we're approaching this benchmark.
And what does that mean?
Where the number, let's look and see, shall we? What has happened?
What does that mean? Is it in here?
What has happened as the population of incarnate souls has approached the benchmark of 7.83 billion souls incarnate? What has happened in the past year?
Some chaos.
There's been a fair amount of chaos. However, at the same time, one could look at it like the whole world has basically pumped the brakes, and everyone has been brought to a place of self-reflection globally.
Yes, global self-reflection.
Exactly.
Quarantine to meditate and retreat into their inner treasure chest.
Right. And we've learned that no one is free unless and until we are all free.
That was just a recent one. So timely.
We're on that's what's on the menu.
When one
what
of us
else
cries,
would you like at the buffet?
We all cry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No one is. Everybody is connected to everyone else, which is what.
So global consciousness is happening.
That print that you bought.
Yes.
That's the words on that.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. It's all about how we're all connected. No one is untouched. No one is unloved.
A lot of times you hear in a spiritual conversation, everything is connected to everything, and they say oneness, but then some people say, how is it oneness? So you're actually describing how it's now oneness.
Oh, it's not just now. It was oneness before.
Yet we feel
that's all there can be. But because we're spiritually sovereign, infinite and immortal beings, we can make this. We're making this all up ourselves.
We are truly making it up. Universal income.
Right, the UBI, the Universal Basic Income, which is basically us just. It's
getting
a response
paid
for us
to be who we are.
Exactly. Which is what Bach Mitzvah was all about. But let me get to the essence of where this ended up. This. I've always wanted to know what the heck is really going on here, right?
What is happening on this planet?
Baby, what the heck? Ever since I was 4 or 5 years old, I was like, this did not make sense.
Right.
The world did not make sense.
What's happening?
Just standing in the woods, that makes sense to me. Standing on the beach, that makes perfect sense to me. But what was going on in the world made absolutely what people were doing to one another and with one another made no sense. How we were treating one another made no sense whatsoever, especially as a person of color in this culture. I grew up in a neighborhood outside of an Air Force base that was a very treacherous place. It was an emotionally fraught place, all the tension. And we're talking about outside of an Air Force base in the middle of the Cold War, right? There were TAC units, and this base was basically guarded North America, the New York, Boston area. Right?
What did your father do in the military?
He was a quality control specialist on fighter aircraft, so he made sure that if somebody fixed it, it was actually fixed so nobody would die, right? When he came back from Vietnam, he was up for the job of the crew chief on Air Force One.
Whoa, okay.
Right, and his hobby was ham radio.
Ham radio, okay.
Right. So he would come home from work and he'd go down into the basement and work on ham radio all night long. And so if you sense any sort of geekness,
cool.
It's
it came from your dad. Yeah.
It definitely. Although my mother was really good at fixing televisions with kitchen utensils.
Where'd your music come from? You play piano by ear. Where'd that come from?
Just paying attention.
I had a baby grand piano in my last house, and he would just come and he would just start playing, and I would just like float through the living room, and I'd be like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" He goes, "I don't know. I'm just playing all the white keys. Oh, I'm just playing all the black keys. I'm like, what are you doing?"
Yeah, really. Yeah, it's magnificent.
You even recorded one of your first movies at my house.
I did.
With my bird.
With the bird.
Nikki.
Frankie.
Oh, yeah, Frankie.
That's right. Yeah.
Frankie is immortal now because he's in your recording.
Yeah.
And what movie is that? What's that one called? So people.
Oh, that's The Song of My Soul.
The Song of My Soul was recorded at my old house with my piano and my bird singing and all your amazing pictures that are at the rate of your breath.
Oh no.
Remember?
But the recording, I recorded it at your house, and the name of that piece that I recorded is called The Song of My Soul, and so is that video. It's like, I think it's 77 minutes long, right?
Right, but don't you teach them how to breathe?
Then I used that music I remastered the music, and I used it in the Sacred Geometry Paintings movie documentary.
Okay.
Yeah, which is a whole nother universe.
I'm in there.
We're trying
I'm included in there.
We're trying to get to
oneness. We're talking about the Schumann resonance and coherence. Coherence.
I love that word.
Well, I think soul coherence.
Yes.
Is kind of what you're pointing to, right? With the frequency.
So, I want to get into this. In 1999, on the autumnal equinox on Silbury Hill in southern England, in the rain, I met this brother named Rory McQueston. I came up with these two friends of mine up one side of Silbury Hill, and he came up the other side, and we met at the top. And we've been friends ever since. And he lives in southern England, and for a number of years he lived within a couple of kilometers of Silbury Hill and the largest stone circle in the world, Avebury Stone Circle. And at one point he surveyed all the ley lines in his area on a daily basis, sometimes on an hourly basis, for more than a year and a half.
Wow.
And his training was as a geologist, and he worked underground in the gold mines of South Africa back in the day. And that's where he learned how to dowse and has been teaching people how to dowse ever since.
Okay, so dowsing, go over that for the people that don't know. Two little rods and...
That's one way of doing it, yeah.
Okay, and what is it doing? It's like, it's pulling in magnetism? How are those copper wire tuning in?
You know, the copper wire thing is one method of revealing to yourself your unconscious sensitivity to subtle energy.
To subtle energy, okay.
Right. So there's subtle energy, folks, right? And I'm not talking about what you're plugging into the wall, and I'm not talking about, that. I'm talking about what the universe is made of.
Do birds feel subtle energy? Are they flying on ley lines?
That's a good question. Everything exists as subtle energy, ultimately. Once again, we're making all this stuff up. We're making up these distinctions. We're using these words that we made up
to point at things.
Right. Remember that the thing is, the word is not the thing. The thing is the thing.
Right. Water's not, the word water is not water.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, let's just move ahead with the subtle energy concept here.
Okay.
So, you may have heard of the term ley lines, right? We prefer to use the term subtle energy lines.
Okay.
Because there's a distinction about a ley line being a specific kind of subtle energy line. And suffice to say that Rory has basically done the survey of and some of the most revealing information about the natural energy field of the universe, and also specifically how it relates to this planet. And so there's a naturally occurring grid system of all these energy lines that run all over the planet. And
also, too, a man-made system, because isn't Stonehenge and the pyramids, those are man-made influencers to the ley lines. They're either
right.
on ley lines, or the stones have energetic properties that
right.
have subtle energy fields.
Right.
Inside of the energy field.
Those are human attempts at manipulating the naturally occurring energy field.
Oh, okay.
Subtle energy field. Okay. Right? Yeah. I mean, we do it all the time with our thoughts.
Okay, but I would say that if you went to Glastonbury and you went to those stone circles, you must have felt a different energy shift than other places.
Of course. And you do just walking down the street, right? When you go from one room to another in your house,
you can feel the shift.
You feel the shift, you know. And if
100%.
you come in out of the world and you walk into your house, you can tell immediately that, you know, what's right and what's not.
Anybody who's ever driven Uber will know that this is true. Hollywood's got a different energy, and Brentwood's got a different energy, and North Hollywood's got a different energy.
That's right.
And the Palisades and Venice. And each time you went into a different pocket, you could feel the energy shift. It was almost like a dimensional shift.
Exactly. But here's one of the things, is the whole field is affected by your thoughts and emotions and focus, right?
Okay.
All right. So until 3 years ago, up until 3 years ago, all the people that had been studying ley lines and earth energy and all that kind of stuff, they determined that there were a number of different kinds of lines, and they're mostly determined by how wide they are, right? So there were from 1 pace wide to 5 pace wide. Then there was 10 paces wide, 20 paces wide, and 30 paces wide. And then there were these 50 pace wide lines, right? And the 50 pace wide lines were known as Emperor Dragon lines. And there were only 3 pairs of those around the world. So there were 6 of them.
Say it again. Emperor Dragon lines?
Emperor Dragon lines, right?
Okay.
And
that's the largest.
The largest.
50.
The larger they are, the more powerful they are. And so wherever any ley lines cross one another, wherever subtle energy lines cross one another, is what's called a node, or vortex is formed there, right? And an energy node, subtle energy node. And these places are really powerful places. And the wider the lines are that cross through a node, are the more powerful the node is.
Don't they typically build churches and stuff on those nodal points?
And that was, the Catholic Church
hijacked all that?
Yeah. They wanted to, control the world. And the way that because the ancient, all these, there's a theory, and I write about it in the book, that all of human conflicts have been based on an attempt to see who gets to control the grid. And because it's always been known that who controls the grid controls the world.
What is the grid?
The system of naturally occurring subtle energy lines.
Okay, but explain to me, how can you control the world at controlling that grid? How can you control that? Can you change the weather? Can you change people's view of what's happening? Can you influence their mind?
Here we go. Now we're deeper down the rabbit hole, America.
Going to the thing. Here we go. Get it? You guys get this? I get it.
So
scan it.
There have been as many ways to control the grid as there are people, right? Because everybody's trying to make what they want to have happen in this world.
But do you remember Land of the Lost when they had the pylons and the slee stack? They'd go in and change the crystals, and it would change the weather. It would change their aspect of the grid. But they would symbolically do it with these crystals in these like little pyramid pylons that they would go into, and they'd influence the grid.
Cool. Well, here's the thing.
Land of the Lost. 70s. It's the 70s.
So, what Rory discovered is, and this is where we're getting down to the meat here, folks, is that at 4 times of the year, at least, there are a couple of other times that happen partially, but at 4 times of the year, all the ley lines on the planet begin to vibrate at the same frequency. And at those times, if you are at a node, what you can witness is that there is an energetic structure, a vortex structure, that is a variation on the double tube torus, which is, a tube torus is like a bagel shape. And a double tube torus is, imagine one bagel on top of the other.
Okay, and they're going like this. The energy's coming out like this in all directions, 360 degrees.
Right.
Okay.
And so at these structures, imagine that the lower bagel is underground and the upper bagel is just above ground. Okay. Okay. And so there's variations of that depending on how many different and what kind of width or strength the ley lines are, or subtle energy lines are that are going through the node. Okay. Okay. So if there's the Emperor Dragon lines, the 3 pairs. One of the things he discovered is that all ley lines are running around the world in pairs, right? So if you're on one, it has a twin, either to your left or your right. Okay. Okay. And the Emperor Dragons, there were only 6 places at that time, until 3 years ago, there were only 6 places on the planet where they crossed one another. And only 4 of them were on land. And one of those places is Mount Kailash, to give you an idea of the power of the Emperor Dragons. So Mount Kailash is the most sacred mountain to Asia, basically. That is powerful. People make a pilgrimage to it, and they walk around it, and there are some people who do this prostration all the way around it, for miles. Miles around it. They completely prostrate themselves, take a step, then prostrate themselves all the way around the mountain. That's how sacred this mountain is. It's sacred to like 5 different religions in that area.
Sadhguru just took a bunch of people there, and they actually film what happens in that energy. The people's bodies start going off. They have these spontaneous awakenings, and they're sobbing.
Yeah. So that's one of these nodes. That's one of the 4 land-bound nodes of the Emperor Dragons, just to give you an idea of the power of these. Hold up, hold up.
There's pictures of the dragons in here.
I hear you. Hold on. Okay. So, 3 years ago, 6 more Emperor Dragon lines showed up. Okay, so 3 more Emperor Dragon pairs showed up on the Earth in the past 3 years, until from 2017 to 2019.
They just appeared.
They showed up. They just suddenly showed up. Okay, and you'll be happy to know, until 3 years ago, there were no Emperor Dragon lines in North America. None.
Okay.
Right. Now, there's a pair that runs across, from coast to coast, across the United States.
Is it on the 10?
No. No. But check this out. You know that archaeological site I discovered in Big Sur?
Yeah.
Okay. A year ago, I get a photograph sent to me by Rory, where he sends me a Google Map picture of this spot, and he has an X on it, And I looked at it, and I'm like, I know this picture of the place he's showing me because I've looked at it a gazillion times. Because it's where the first site I discovered is. And where he drew the X is 100 yards away from the first site that I discovered.
So intuitively, you already had discovered that site.
Exactly.
Energetically.
Exactly.
Okay.
In real life.
Okay. Now, how does this apply to anybody's life?
And he discovered it. By remote dowsing. Okay. And what that spot is, it's the first node that this emperor dragon forms on the continent of North America as it comes out of the Pacific Ocean. It crosses the Pacific Ocean.
Oh, okay.
And it's, this spot is like 5 miles uphill. It's on the crest of the Pacific Range. And it's the first node that the emperor dragons make as they go across the country.
And why is that important?
Why is that important?
Why is that important? To most people who have a job and are drinking maybe Starbucks coffee or somebody's drinking a tea, why do we have to know that there's a dragon there? And what can we do with that?
Emperor dragon.
An emperor dragon.
Emperor dragon.
Okay.
Okay. So the emperor dragons come out of the Pacific Ocean. This is the one that is near the archaeological site that I discovered is the southernmost one. And the northerly of the pair comes out of the ocean at Sunset Point on Monterey, on the Monterey Peninsula, and you can see it from Pebble Beach. And it the southerly one comes out of the ocean at a place called Jade Cove. So we call this the node. We call that the Jade Node. Mm-hmm. And we call both of them the Jade Pair, because why not? And because once again, we're all just making this stuff up, right?
Right.
So these two are 50 miles apart, and they go all the way across the country. And the southerly one exits the country into the Atlantic Ocean at in the vicinity of Kitty Hawk and the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And the northerly one exits at Newport News, Virginia. And they're a little further apart at that point. But one of the things I went when I discovered that I had the cancer in September. There were two places, and I didn't know for the first 2 months. I had no idea how long I had to live, right? So there were two places that I felt that I needed to go in case I wasn't going to be around much longer. And the first place was back to the archaeological site in Big Sur, and the second place is where I'm from on Cape Cod. And so when I found out that I had, a few more months, the solstice was coming up, and I went up on that mountain for the solstice. Mm-hmm. Okay, so how this works is 3 days, approximately 3 days before the actual solstice and equinox. Okay. All the ley lines begin to resonate at the same frequency, and up until 3 years ago, the larger the line, the longer the frequency, right? The shortest frequency was like the 1 pace wide or the 5 pace wide. Those lines resonated between 6 and 10 hours. So what they do is, if we're saying that it's a 1 pace wide line, which is probably about a meter, right? So over 10 hours, the line itself would move in a meter wide space. Yeah. It would move from left to right, and then from right to left, right?
Okay.
And
what does that mean?
It's like a serpent. It is the serpent in all the ancient iconography. That's what people are. It's a code, right?
So
everybody and dragon
are
and
you
code.
following the energy of that code? Or are you going with that energy?
That's up to you. The point is that these naturally occurring subtle energy lines, that's what they undulate.
They do move like a worm,
like
a snake,
serpent,
or
like the dragon.
Reminds me of Dune. You know that in the sand
exactly.
that thing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
and
also
that's why
Beetlejuice had a serpent.
The movie.
In the movie Beetlejuice, there's a serpent.
I haven't seen it.
Because of the astral plane. You go into the astral plane, and there's these sand dunes, and you see the serpent going across the terrain on the planet.
Cool.
Dragon energy.
Right. So also water. So ancient iconography of water, waves and all that kind of stuff,
right,
are associated with the serpent, or with the subtle energy lines of the earth.
And that's important.
And so the ancients knew this, right? And they use these symbols to educate one another about, specifically, this is where this line goes or whatever. But and this is what we kind of get into the book is, you mentioned something on the phone about the Kali Yuga, right? And this is where we kind of need to get into a little bit of a discussion. So, and this is another major point that's talked about in this book is, you know who Yogananda is?
I do.
Okay, so Yogananda's guru,
Kalishwar.
Sri Yukteswar.
Oh, Sri Yukteswar, yes. I'm sorry,
right.
Kalishwar, yeah. Sri Yukteswar, yeah.
Right. Sri Yukteswar published a book in 1936 called The Holy Science.
Yes, I do have that.
Good.
It actually might be on that shelf, The Holy
right.
Science.
So there's a preface in the book that talks about, and you need to study that preface.
I love that.
Good. Because what he talks about in this is a 24,000-year cycle, right? And the 24,000-year cycle is the egg-shaped orbit of the solar system around its twin. The majority of the stars in our galaxy are binary systems. And
this was in the Dark Crystal too. The binary star system.
So there's a possibility that there's the twin of the sun could be what's known as a brown dwarf, which would be something like a star that's something like on the order of like Jupiter or Saturn. It's not big enough to be seen, but it's bigger than a planet, let's say. And anyway, according to these ancient scriptures that Sri Yukteswar references, the solar system revolves around that twin in this 24,000-year cycle. And the significance of that revolution is that it brings us at the fat end of the egg.
Right.
We come closer to the galactic center. And at the sharp end of the egg, we're at the furthest point from the galactic center. And when we're at the furthest point from the galactic center, it's really hard for incarnate souls to perceive and manifest divinity. And the closer we are to the galactic center, the easier it is for incarnate souls to perceive and manifest divinity. So this 24,000-year cycle is basically the cycle of consciousness potential on the physical plane of the earth.
So enlightened civilizations like Mu or something that had been here before that will also return to itself.
Right. And so you can divide that egg in half. And there's the 12,000 years of the ascending cycle, where everything is expanding and accelerating and all that kind of stuff, and the 12,000 years of the descending cycle, where everything is kind of coming apart. The wheels are coming off the wagon, right?
Yes.
And this descending cycle is responsible, according to Sri Yukteswar, for this
fallen consciousness,
disinformation, fallen consciousness, and this disinformation that's happened around the concept of the Kali Yugas. Okay, so the way that the scriptures divide the egg, right, is into these specific periods, right? So according to Sri Yukteswar, when we were at the closest point to the galactic center in the year 499 AD. Okay? And then the way from 499 AD, there's a 100-year interface period on either side of that. Then 1,000 years, then 100 years. And those are called the Kali Yugas. Okay. Right? Then there's 200 years interface period, then a 2,000-year period, then 200 years, then 300 years, 3,000 years, 300 years, 400 years, 4,000 years, 400 years, and then you're at the point that's closest to the galactic center, right? And so he says that what happened, how this disinformation happened, is about 5,000 years ago, in the descending cycle, there was a Hindu, there was a king who abdicated to his grandson. And he took his whole retinue up into the Himalayas because he was like, it's a descending cycle. And
I'm out of here.
Yeah, he's like, we just want to go up into the Himalayas and meditate to make the most out of this incarnation.
What are we going to do?
Because things are just getting stupider
really
and stupider and stupider. Unfortunately, he took his whole retinue, which means he took all the scribes and the people that actually knew about the cycles and how to read the stuff. And he left, the people that were left were like the second team, right? And,
what do I do with all of this?
And when they passed on that information and into their descendants in the descending cycle. And eventually, the scribed, copied and scribed, and mistakes got made, and people just were copying stuff that they didn't really understand. Okay. And there was he actually dials into where they made a miscalculation, and so if most people, there's a lot of people that think that the Kali Yuga is, they'll tell you, we're in the Kali Yuga and it's 400,000 years long and all this stuff. No, that is not what
good
it's
news
about,
for us. It's not that long.
Yeah. Good news is we don't have to scare ourselves like that anymore. Right?
Right. We're on the turn. We already turned, right?
Well, here's the point. We're 1,500
ascending.
years past the point of being furthest from the galactic center, and for the next 10,000 years,
going up.
We're 10,500 years. We're in the ascending cycle. So you notice
10,000 years
in your life, in your lifetime, you've seen you've experienced the acceleration.
Absolutely.
Right? And guess what,
from the
folks?
60s to the 70s, to the 80s to the 90s.
Guess what, folks? It's not going to stop.
It's going to keep going.
It's only going to continue to accelerate, And I'm an astrologer as well, and an
amazing astrologer.
We all talk about, you've heard that song from the 60s. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Yeah, right. So, they had it right in that it is the dawning of the age of Aquarius, and we will not be in the age of Aquarius for another 350 years. Right? We're on the cusp of the age of Aquarius, which means that we are actually still within the age of Pisces for the next 350 years.
We're still in Pisces for the next 350 years?
Without question. The way it's all about where the sun rises on the morning of the spring equinox, and where it's rising on the morning of the spring equinox right now is at approximately 5 degrees Pisces, moving backwards through the zodiac, right? And the whole thing moves at a rate of a degree every 72 years.
Wow.
Right? So we got 5 times 72 till we get, till the spring equinox moves back into Aquarius. So we're in astrology, we talk about the cusps. Anything that's within 5 degrees of the line
is on a cusp
between two signs. That's the cusp.
Okay.
So the person, Kelly Phipps, the guy I learned astrology from, he was fond of saying, there are no lines in the sky. So we're talking about fields of energy.
Right.
And so we're in the field, this interface period, between Pisces and Aquarius. And, what people, whatever they think about the age of Aquarius or the age of Pisces for that matter, Pisces is about, it rules the 12th house. It's about connecting with the collective human unconscious, right? It's about connecting with universal awareness, right? Aquarius is a sign that has to do with technology, right? And intuition and communion with divine mind. And so that's where we're at, right between those two energy fields.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, welcome home. Okay.
So glad I chose this time of the now.
Right, and that's what's important about this number of people that are on the planet. Nobody is here by mistake. Everybody is here by agreement and intention, right? There is so much that goes into any
incarnation
person coming into
I'm coming in. Psh.
Yeah, exactly. It's all, when you study astral projection, you get an idea, you have to have an understanding of the basic structure of the universe. And, I've been studying this for about, 10 years or so. And there's a magnificent book I highly recommend called Demystifying the Outer Body Experience by this brother named, what's his name? Luis Minero. He's based here in LA. And he basically made a textbook on how to astral project. And
that sounds juicy.
So the first 4 chapters are about, the how-to.
To get out of the body.
Right.
Consciously.
But there's 7 chapters. And the 5th, 6th, and 7th chapters are about what is this?
Where are you?
And a lot of that information comes from the collected knowledge of all of these. There's this organization called the Universal Consciousness Academy. Universal Consciousness Academy, I think. And it started in the 60s by a Brazilian psychiatrist. And so they go all over the world, and they set up these centers where they teach people how to astral project. And so a lot of the reason why he made this textbook was because the textbook they were using was in Portuguese, right? So he wanted to create this textbook in English to be able to teach people, but a lot of their information comes from all the people that have taught astral projection and their experiences out there. And there's a general survey of what this structure is that we find ourselves in the midst of. And that's what I've been studying for the past 10 years. And, ever since I was, 4 years old, I wanted to know what is really going on here.
What are we in?
Yeah, what is this?
What is this?
Because it's obviously,
a simulation.
that it's not, it's not working for everybody, right?
Right.
The level of suffering is such that, people have felt the need to create religions around, let's stop having so much friggin' suffering for everybody. Right.
Where's the
it may be working for a handful, but it can be working better. And I have always been trying to figure out how do we go about that.
And I'm sure it's inside here.
You think? So, go ahead.
Well, because we can't, we can't describe the entire secrets of the universe in 1 hour video. How do we take the Schumann resonance, the Imperial Dragon ley lines, and the fact that we have this universe in astral projection and this time period for us to accelerate? Can we access God consciousness?
Okay. You can access God consciousness right now. You are actually. So
in the point on the egg where there would be considered a Kali Yuga, could people access God consciousness, or I just thought you said it's not as easy?
Anytime. The difference between when you study astral projection, one of the things that you realize is that the divining factor of the creation is degrees of density. Right? The defining factor between the physical plane and the subtler energy realms, what I call the metaphysical realms, right? What we choose to call the etheric, the astral, and the causal planes, and what's beyond that, have to do with density. So all of those four places, the physical, etheric, astral, and causal, those are the realms of density, right? And there are places that are more dense than that. But then there's where we actually friggin' come from, which is beyond the realms of density, right? Which is a place that I call well, ultimately it's the source, right? It's the source of infinite consciousness. But,
okay.
The ultimate, I call it the ultimate reality, right? And I can tell you from my own, I had a spiritual acceleration where I was in a state of bliss 24 hours a day for nearly 3 months, back in the winter of 1993-94. And when I was in that state, twice I went to this place that was in the presence of the source of the one. And I can tell you that every person that you or I will ever encounter on any plane of existence, there's an aspect of you there.
Yeah.
Right? We can call it, I call it the great company of souls, but
that's beautiful.
And
I love that. The great company
you
of
have
souls.
access to that person all the time.
So there's an aspect of you on a higher dimension.
All higher dimensions. There's
all
an aspect.
Higher.
Yeah.
So it's like in every harmonic. You're
and
in
they're
every
all,
note.
guess where they are? They're all right inside you.
Yeah.
Right?
Is that why people meditate, to go in to get them?
Of course. Or not.
Some people don't. They just walk into nature and it just happens.
Right. Right. Or they're sitting in an office. Or they're sitting on their couch.
Or a bench.
Well, here's the thing. This is another thing that's come through all the stuff I've been through. Everything is trance. The key to all things is trance. That is what we're here.
You got to unpack that for me. Trance. What does that mean?
There is no point in your existence where you are not in some form of trance. The more you think that you're out of a trance is the more convincing the trance that you're in.
Now, okay, so when you say trance, are you talking about like the Maya? Are you talking about Inception? You're in a dream within a dream?
Exactly.
A dream within a dream.
All of it. All of it.
So we're dreaming right now? You and I are dream characters in our own
if you want to call it,
reality
if that's what you want to call it. But
this is a trance.
But it's trance, right? Like in your day, you spend the majority of your time
in a trance.
In trance. If you live to be 83 years old, you will have spent a third of your life out of your body.
Okay, so let me just bring that down to practical application. You're driving on the 405, you end up somewhere, you don't know how you got there because you're in a trance. You've left your body.
But
that's
just,
a practical
just in
thing.
terms of sleep. Sleep is trance, right? Daydreaming is trance. When you're reading a book, you're in trance. When you're watching television, you're in trance. When you stop to think, you're in trance because you're not here, right?
So are you not present when you're in trance?
I want to show you something. You want to start travel right now?
Yes.
Okay. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. The center of the Milky Way.
Yes.
You just went there.
Right.
Faster than light.
Yes, the speed of thought.
Exactly.
The speed of thought.
Faster than light.
Right.
Okay? The Pleiades.
Zoom. Right.
Right? Whatever you imagine the Pleiades to be, you just went there.
You just transport yourself.
You just went there.
This is a Stargate.
This is a spacesuit.
This is a spaceship.
This is a spacesuit right here.
Yeah.
Okay, your consciousness is what's up.
Okay.
Right?
So that would be the point of awareness?
This is a vessel for your consciousness, right?
To move in and out of too, because you can
leave
it.
And you're doing it all the time.
Edgar Casey did
you spend a third of your life out of your body.
So are you astral traveling all the time? A third of your time? Is that what you're saying?
Well, here's the thing. There is an aspect of you in the astral that never leaves.
Right.
As long as your consciousness is in the realm of density, right? Because there's, there's consciousnesses that.
That was my dream of your painting, because what I saw was an earth and an earth and an earth and an earth and an earth, like 10 different earths. And on them were blueprint lines. And it was all math and sacred geometry that I couldn't read, but it was the same colors you're painting, these big, huge blueprints. And I had 10 charts of them. Yeah. And they were like, there's a you here, there's a you here, there's a you here, there's a, you know, the ascension of the earth.
Right.
And I saw 100 years because I had 10 charts of decades on each chart.
Right, right. Well, here's another thing to blow your mind. Okay. We were talking earlier about parallel dimensions, parallel universes and everything.
Right. This is a parallel universe right now.
So to infinite consciousness, the source of infinite consciousness, it's all one.
Yes.
Right? All possibilities. It experiences all possible universes, infinities, and dimensions. Simultaneously. Right? And
they talk about quantum jumping.
And that's why that's one of the reasons why it delights in us, because we're so limited. We're so focused, right? So it gets to experience itself through us. Our limited experience. So, I mean, imagine if you're infinite consciousness,
you're everything.
One of your most prized creations
is to be a flower.
Would be to experience the illusion of
individuality,
of separateness from yourself.
Okay.
Because ultimately it's just masturbation.
Okay, so thank you for that visual.
It's true.
So no, I agree with you.
Because it's all one, remember?
It is all one. So I wanna say my experience of that myself, to just tune into what you're saying. So I had hired a shaman at my old house, and I experienced DMT. And I remember at this point, like, I didn't want to do my job anymore. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my house. I was very, very depressed. I thought, I just want to die anyway, so I might as well just do this medicine. And I remember coming back from the trip, I was so thankful I was an individual, because I fell into the kaleidoscope of the sacred geometric patterns, and every time I breathed, I was every living thing in every single dimension, and I was no thing. I was no one thing. I was a continuum of thing. Of a frequency that looked like a little magic box that was like sacred geometric. And when I came back, I was like, oh my God, I'm a being, I'm a separate. And I was so happy that I came back to this dimension and I could feel myself separate than the table and the chair and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Magnificent.
It gave me a greater appreciation for my incarnation. You know, and I was like, okay, so I chose to be here. I don't want to take the exit door sideways. I might as well finish my life contract. What is the appreciation of playing this character, this role, this moment, this lifetime? And now I want to circle back to what does this have to do with humanity right now on this energy field with these dragon ley lines?
Okay, so the solstice is the 20th.
Summer.
And this next solstice,
coming up, so a couple weeks.
Not weeks.
A what?
Today is the 12th.
Oh.
Or is it the 13th?
Wasn't it it's the 20th? Yeah, so it's like another week.
Yeah. Another week from now. And so 3 days leading up to it, all the ley lines on the planet will be coming into harmony to vibrate at the same frequency, right? And instead of them vibrating at like every 6 hours or 10 hours, they'll all ultimately be vibrating at the same frequency as the Emperor Dragon lines, which is 48 hours for it to go from one side to the other, right? Mm-hmm. All the ley lines on the planet will be vibrating at the same time, at the same frequency. And before, 3 years ago, that wasn't true. They would kind of meet in the middle. You know, the Emperor Dragons would meet the smaller lines. They'd meet, somewhere around 24 hours. Right?
Uh-huh.
So the faster ones would slow down and the slower ones would speed up. But since these 3 new Emperor Dragon lines have shown up, 3 Emperor Dragon line pairs have shown up, they're all, a couple of things are happening. All the smaller ley lines are matching the frequencies of the larger ones, and all the ley lines on the planet are getting wider. So those 50 pace wide lines are about 30% larger than they were, or wider than they were before.
So explain to me the impact that has on a human being outside of a ley line and then going into a ley line? Because I know for hundreds of thousands of years, maybe longer, people would migrate on specific astrological dates to get into the ley line currency. Does it upgrade your DNA? Is it turning back on your system? Are you going to 12-dimensional DNA strands?
Exactly.
So butterfly? You're turning from a caterpillar to a butterfly, soaking in the ley line?
That's a good question. We'll see. Right? You don't like that, do you?
No, I love it. I love the unknown. It's okay to be in the unknown.
So here's we're discovering what all this means. I mean, like I said, it was only 10 years ago that Rory discovered these periods of harmony. Okay? So let me finish what's happening. So on the solstice, once all the ley lines are in harmony with one another, the double tube torus variants are in the nodes are formed. These energetic structures, right?
Okay.
And the significance, the character of these structures are such that the veil is thin between the dimensional planes.
For 48 hours or 72?
For up to 6 days.
3 before, 3 after.
While all the ley lines stay in harmony. They'll be resonating at a period of 48 hours, right? They'll be doing the sine cosine.
Where will
48
you be?
hours.
Where will you be on the solstice?
That's the question.
Where will you be on the solstice?
Here's the thing. There are nodes all over the place, all over the planet. Okay. But the ones that have the emperor dragons in them obviously are more powerful, like Mount Kailash, right? Now, this new set of lines, they're new to us, okay? Right. But what I didn't tell you is what's causing them, what the source of these lines is.
Okay.
Okay? All the ley lines on the planet are subtle energy lines on the planet are caused by three things. One of three things. Either they're coming from the Earth itself, the sun, or galactic cores, the center of galaxies.
Galactic cores?
Galactic cores. The center of galaxies. Okay? Like the center of the Milky Way galaxy, on the center of galaxies. Because galaxies...
Like the Bermuda Triangle, we could go through
Hold up. Galaxies...
It's a hole. It's a portal.
Galaxies are radiating radiation, the full spectrum of radiation, 24 hours a day in all directions, right?
Yes.
Because one of the reasons is it's believed that there's a black hole at the center of all galaxies, right? And as it happens, up until 3 years ago, there were, at least 3 galaxies that were bombarding the solar system with their specific kind of radiation that were causing... okay, so I'm going to take a step back and explain how this works, all right?
I hope you guys are still with us right now.
So the core of the Earth rotates against the outer core of the Earth, and it causes a sound, and that sound radiates out to the surface of the Earth, and that's the cause of that's the cause of the ley lines that are subtle energy lines that are between 1 and 5 paces wide, or used to be. Now they're wider, they're 30% wider. Okay. Now, the 10 pace, 20, and 30 pace wide lines. There's a full spectrum of radiation that comes from the sun, and some of that radiation, when it hits, the upper atmosphere, it causes what are known as neutrinos, these subatomic particles that pass through the Earth. Mm-hmm. And when those neutrinos pass through the core of the Earth, some of them create this vibration, this low frequency vibration that radiates to the surface of the Earth and is the source of the 10, 20, and 30 pace wide, or formerly 30 pace wide, subtle energy lines. Now, galactic cores, the radiation that comes, cosmic radiation that comes from them, does the same thing. When it hits the atmosphere, it causes neutrinos. The neutrinos pass through the Earth, and they create a certain frequency, sound frequency, and that sound frequency, when it radiates out and hits the surface of the Earth, it creates the infrared dragon lines.
Okay, but what I want to say is this the capacity to travel into different dimensions inside of these tubatoruses?
Definitely.
So that, okay, that's why I want to bring up the Bermuda Triangle, because I feel like that has an opening where people can actually go into these black holes.
Yeah, that's something completely...
Well, I'm just saying that they were saying that there's a triangle and there are ley lines there, and that the ability for us to travel to different star systems without spaceships is what I'm talking about, how the universe is folded on top of itself, and the tubatorus you can go through.
I hear you.
Yeah, the different dimensions.
What I'm saying to you is, this is your spacesuit.
Right.
This is our spaceship.
Right.
Right, but you don't need your spacesuit in order to do what you just said. We just went to the center of the universe, the center of the
with
the
consciousness. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. We can't poo-poo that, because you do that in your meditation, right? You do it in your meditation. You can.
But let's talk about the Earth, though. So the Earth, energetically, as a body of a spaceship, is producing these.
It's also conscious.
They're producing these ley lines, and is there an ability? Because in your painting and in my dream, I saw the Earth going through a portal, and it would have different octaves, and there were different frequencies on the different Earths in multiple dimensions. Mm-hmm. So is that where we're at right now with getting into those ley lines?
We're definitely getting into the ley lines.
It's coming up. This is a book. We have a map. Do we have to go to these ley lines or no? What's the point?
Okay, so what I was trying to get to is that there are these emperor dragons going across America now that have that are now going through these previously existing nodes and making them more powerful. And then you have the space between them, the 50-mile swath between them that I call the sacred corridor. And what I've envisioned is that in the next few centuries, 4 times a year, people are going to be migrating to these, making pilgrimages to these nodes at the solstices and equinoxes to make their prayer of manifestation. Because it's amplified to the whole concept of the secret, right? That we create our own reality and all that kind of stuff. And people were kind of frustrated because they were trying that secret thing and it wasn't really working. Well, my friend Rory published a book called The Key to the Secrets of the Ancients, right? And in that book, he talks about this very point that people found that the secret didn't work for them all the time.
Right.
And he found how to make the secret work 100% of the time. So if you are at a node, and you are at a node at the solstices and equinoxes when all the ley lines in the planet are vibrating at the same frequency, you're able to make your manifestation prayer and access the subtler realms. Now, reality manifests on the causal first, then the astral, then the etheric, and then the physical. So if you're able
Wait a minute. Say that again.
Reality begins on the causal first. It manifests on the causal first, then the astral, then the etheric, then the physical.
So you're saying that's in a descending order of the planes. I thought the astral was right next to the physical.
It is. It's within it.
How come you have to manifest on the causal first?
How come you have to?
How come you do?
That's what we created first, right? We created this as an infinite and immortal children of the light. Our first step into this creation
was causal plane?
Was the causal plane.
I did not know.
Then our next extension out is what we call the astral plane. Then our next extension out is the etheric plane. Then our next extension out is the physical, right? And we're still going, you know, because, you know, infinite consciousness, the source of infinite consciousness, there's nothing better to do.
So I want to get this straight. If I didn't get to a ley line and I wasn't in the vortex,
you don't need to do this.
You can still manifest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Because in my own incarnation experience, I get into a peak state, I hold a concentrated thought with focus, and I materialize. Now, what I got caught up with was not mastering my fear. So I was so great at manifesting, I would manifest anything I thought about. And there's a movie called Sphere with Dustin Hoffman, and they went underneath the earth and they touched that sphere, and then anything they thought happened because they had nightmares about sea monsters. The sea monsters manifested. So then they decided to all forget that they could materialize because they didn't want to bring the technology up because humankind wasn't ready for it. So giving humans the power to materialize instantly could be dangerous if they haven't mastered their fear.
This can't be abused.
How is that? Because of where we are astrologically in this ascension to the core of the universe? The galactic center?
You said it yourself. You would drop into a state of coherence, right?
Coherence, definitely.
And you would be able to manifest, right?
Yes.
But it can't be abused because, and this is one of the things that I was given to understand when I was going through the spiritual acceleration, is absolute truth doesn't need to be defended. Right?
Okay, but let's say somebody just wants to manifest a global takeover, and they sit on that vortex.
You can't harm anybody.
How is that if everybody has the equal amount of free will?
You drop out if you're in that mode. You're not in the mode of manifesting. You're not in coherence.
You're absolutely not in coherence. You're absolutely not in coherence. Yes.
So you can't. There's this natural dead man switch, right?
That blocks that from creating.
Yeah, you block yourself because you're not loving. You're not loving. You're not compassionate. You're not open. You're not honest. You're not in harmony with absolute truth. Period. How did we as human beings create war in this dimension then if we weren't able to manifest something that's not in the best interest of everyone? There's a good question about is what we've created not in the best interest depending on the long view. Okay. Now the long view is on the personal view, it sucks to get obliterated by tanks and bombs and all that kind of stuff. Right. However, if you look at, this is what I have to do. You have to look at the whole thing with discipline, right? Unflinchingly. Most people are not used to digesting time mentally. Not really looking at large amounts of time. Yeah. So when you're looking at that huge 26,000 year cycle, you're looking at but you called it huge. It's not huge. I've been examining in my last book. I looked at the past 4 26,000 year cycles, right, and 24,000 year cycles. I'm just saying relative to 100 years of life. My point is exactly. Because people they get uncomfortable thinking in huge swaths of time. But if you look at what's the point? Yeah, what is the point? Let's get to the point, because we're almost at an hour. We're past an hour. We have to cut it off soon. We're stellar at this point. We can do another one, but we really shouldn't keep it past an hour. Too late. I checked already. We're like. But let's wrap it up, though. We can wrap it up. Yeah, we have to wrap it up. Hurry up and get that metaphysical information out there. You can't go for 26,000 years on Facebook. Really? Well, I guess in the singularity, we're always infinite, but most people have a attention span a little less than 26,000 years. Whatever. So, in looking at the large swaths of time, the long view, when I asked, what's been the point of this. One of the things that I've seen, you know, because one of the things we're looking at is, you know, that 24,000 year cycle. It just so happens that the last time we were at the closest point to the galactic center, there was a global catastrophe that pretty much wiped out
the human race.
A good slice of whoever was hanging around.
Are you talking about Atlantis, the flood?
No,
Are you talking about
I'm
a
talking
meteor, the dinosaurs?
No, it was 12,000 years ago, 12,900 years ago. It looks like there's a comet that came into the solar system 30,000 years ago. It's been given a name, which is really funny to me. It's called Anki. It's spelled almost like Anki, the
god, Egyptian.
No, he's Sumerian.
Oh, Sumerian. Okay.
Creator god, right? And but it's actually named for the astronomer that discovered it, right? The German astronomer. It's spelled differently, and when it came in, I think it was something like 50 miles wide.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
And over 30,000 years, it ended up kind of settling into an orbit that takes it from the space between Jupiter and Saturn into between near Mercury and back out. One complete orbit every 3.3 years.
Okay.
Right? And the orbit of the Earth crosses the path of this thing twice a year. And it is the remnants of this comet are the torrid meteor showers, the ones that happen in June and July, and the ones that happen in November.
Okay.
Right? And right now, I think that thing is only about 5 miles wide. So there's like this ring of debris that's in that whole thing, and we pass through it, and that's what a good slice of all those meteors are, right? That we see.
Okay, bring it home.
So what happened is, 12,900 years ago, it looks like there was a close approach of this comet to Earth, and some of it broke off as it was coming back from the sun. And it broke up in the upper atmosphere and exploded in the upper atmosphere over North America and Greenland, and continued across the world to Siberia and everything, and ultimately whatever was left landed in the Indian Ocean. And in the course of that, it scorched the Earth. It flash melted the 2-mile thick North American ice sheets that were extended as far south as southern Ohio. So Boston, Chicago, New York were under 2 miles of ice. And then they weren't. Right? Just like that. And, fires exterminated 120 megafauna species off of North America. You notice how the majority of the megafauna species are in the southern hemisphere?
No, I didn't notice that.
Like elephants and rhinos and giraffes. Those are, you're a megafauna species, right? Large animals, right? Anything bigger than this is megafauna.
Okay, reel it in, because we're going to end this clip and we'll start another one. But let's get to where this has to do with anything that is in this book. Well,
we're looking at what we're talking about are these long periods, and that the fact that the last major world catastrophe happened when we were at the white end of the egg. And how I got into, what the essence of this book, this is a sequel to the Emergence Beyond 2012 book and movie, right? That's why I started it 10 years ago.
So are we in for a catastrophe? Is that why you brought that up?
Okay, so when I said that, the archaeological site I discovered in Big Sur, I had this, the universe, when I asked the universe, what is this place? Because I discovered it when I was in the middle of that spiritual acceleration,
Right.
right? When you're in that state, you can ask questions and information just comes, right? So I ask the universe. I'm standing in the middle of this, what looks to me like an astronomical observatory.
Okay.
Right? A celestial observatory, man-made. 2 stones aligned to the equinox, sunrise, and sunset points. And I asked the universe, what is this place? And what I saw was all this information that had come to me from reading the book of the Hopi and the story of the ancestors of the Hopi. And in their oral tradition, they talk about 3 previous world destructions.
Right.
And these ancestors of the Hopi were the survivors of the last world destruction, which would have been, now we know, when I read that book, that was 1993, right? It wasn't known, that these world destructions that they were talking about were anything but myth, right? And so ever since I read that book, I've been trying to understand if there was any, how could you put that in a timeline? How could you put those cultural myths, events, into a timeline? Because the second destruction they talk about reads like an eyewitness account of a pole shift, a magnetic pole shift.
Right.
Because they're talking about how the earth rolled over twice, the oceans fell across the land,
yes.
the mountains fell into the sea,
yeah.
and the earth wobbled off its axis and wandered through space for years as everything froze. Now that, whoever wrote that knew that the earth was a sphere and that it had an orbit,
right.
and that it had an axis. I mean, there's too much information in there.
How does that apply to people, though? Like, why would they want to read this book? Like, what information, after they read this, does that affect their life? Do they have to go to the vortex? Do they have to just sit and be the vortex? Is there going to be another catastrophe so that we have to just prepare to turn our bodies into light?
Well, you're going to have to read the book to find out, aren't you?
All right, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to read this book, and we're going to find out, because we're going to end this clip because it's getting really long, and we can always do another one. But inside of the book, there are pictures of the dragons on the...
at the end of the book.
Oh, it's at the end of the book,
But
on the ley lines.
Here is the line.
I like that you made it really big type so that you could actually really read it. So it looks like a big fat book, but it's larger type.
Okay.
So
there you have a map of the United States, and that line that goes across this way.
Yeah.
That's the Emperor Dragon line, the new jade pair that goes across America. And you notice that there's another line that goes like this, north and south.
Okay.
And the place that crosses is a really interesting story about cosmic jokes. But that'll have to wait till another time.
That'll have to wait until the next time. But listen, thank you for doing this interview, and thank you for writing this incredible book. And I love the picture of the book here, because you said that you were in a specific place when you took the picture of this tree.
This picture is taken from standing in the middle between those 2 stones at the archaeological site.
So you can just stare at this picture and transport yourself.
This is a Big Sur on the crest of the Pacific Range.
And be into the flow of this vortex.
Yes.
So this is another portal. All right, so this is Athena StarSeed, David Alexander English, author, writer, screenwriter, sacred geometric painter, composer. Maybe later you'll play the piano for me. That would be so great. I was imagining you playing the piano here. All right, so we love you. Be blessed. Stay happy. Stay high, and realize we're in our little, what you call, spacesuits.
Yeah, that's right.
Our little spacesuits on our Earth spaceship, going through the cosmos. We got Ganesha behind us, letting go of all of our obstacles. Love and light. Mwah. Have a great day, you guys.
Peace.
Peace.